Avery had only lived in the neighborhood for 3 calm, almost 2 quiet weeks when the first real sign of trouble appeared in the form of a large silver SUV parked squarely inside her garage. She stopped on the driveway, gripping 2 grocery bags as her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. The garage had been the very first part of the house she claimed as her own, a peaceful workshop, freshly painted, meticulously arranged, smelling faintly of new wood and possibility. Yet someone had entered it without hesitation, without permission, and without even the courtesy of letting her know. She checked her phone, hoping she had overlooked a message or forgotten a scheduled visit, but nothing explained the intrusion. Before she could gather her thoughts, the front door opened and out walked Karen, the neighbor she barely knew but already sensed would be difficult. Karen didn't look embarrassed or apologetic. Instead, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who believed rules did not apply to her. She waved lazily and announced she had borrowed the space for a little while because her own driveway was inconvenient today. Avery tried to respond with polite confusion, but Karen's tone made it clear she wasn't asking. She was claiming. Every word dripped with entitlement so thick it felt like a challenge. When Karen finally drove away, Avery stepped into her garage, feeling the intrusion settle over her like a weight. The faint tire marks on the concrete felt personal, like fingerprints left on a boundary she hadn't realized she needed to defend. She tried to shake off the unease, telling herself not to overreact, but the violation lingered long after she set down her groceries. Something told her this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the beginning of a problem she would eventually have to confront, no matter how much she wished she didn't have to. Avery woke the next morning determined to reclaim the peace she had moved here for. The violation still sat heavily on her mind, and the more she replayed yesterday's encounter, the more she realized she had allowed Karen's confidence to override her own boundaries. She refused to let that become a pattern. Before even making coffee, she grabbed her keys, went to the hardware store, and bought a sturdier lock for the garage, one that required a key instead of the old flimsy keypad the previous owner had installed. Back home, she replaced the lock, testing it several times until she felt certain no one could easily slip inside again. She hung a small but firm sign on the door, "Private property, no parking." It wasn't aggressive, just clear. She hoped clarity would be enough. But clarity wasn't something Karen seemed interested in. By noon, Avery found a note taped to her front door in large, dramatic handwriting. It accused her of being unneighborly, territorial, and creating hostility in a peaceful community. Karen claimed she had every right to use the garage if she needed temporary accommodation. Avery stared at the letter in disbelief. Her garage wasn't shared property. It wasn't a community facility. Yet Karen spoke as if she had some unspoken authority over it and over Avery. Later, Avery sent a calm, detailed email to the HOA board, asking them to confirm the property rules. If Karen insisted on weaponizing the HOA, Avery needed facts on her side. The reply wasn't immediate, but she felt lighter knowing she had taken a proactive step. That evening, a new voicemail appeared on her phone. Karen's voice was falsely sweet, layered with condescension. She said she hoped Avery wasn't planning to lock her out again because she might need the garage later. The message ended with a warning disguised as advice. Avery replayed it once, jaw tightening. Avery sat at her kitchen table long after the sun had set, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator while Karen's voicemail replayed in her mind. The thinly veiled threat clung to her thoughts, making the walls of the house feel slightly tighter, as if the conflict had seeped into the very air. She had come here for quiet, for a fresh start, for space to breathe, but Karen seemed determined to occupy more than just her garage. She wanted control. Authority. Compliance. Avery felt the pressure of it every time her phone buzzed or a car passed outside. By morning, she realized she needed distance, not just emotional distance but physical space to think clearly. A vacation had been on her mind for months, a dream she kept putting off because life always felt too busy. Now, finally, she had a reason to take one. Stepping away might be the only way to reclaim her sense of peace. More importantly, it would prevent any face-to-face escalation. If Karen wanted to play games, Avery wouldn't be present for them. She planned everything quickly but carefully, a 2-week trip to visit her sister, arrangements for packages to be held, and instructions for her friend Maya to check on the house periodically. Avery trusted Maya completely. She had seen Karen's behavior firsthand and understood the importance of documenting anything unusual. Before leaving, Avery double-checked the garage lock, tugging it twice to make sure it wouldn't budge. When Avery packed her suitcase into her car, she felt a mix of relief and tension. She expected Karen to appear at any moment, and sure enough, as Avery started the engine, Karen's SUV crept slowly down the street. Their eyes met through the windshield. Karen's narrowed, calculating, almost offended. A minute later, as Avery reached the highway, her phone buzzed with a message. She glanced at it at the next stoplight. "You're making a big mistake leaving me out of this. Karen." Avery's first 2 days away felt like unclenching a fist she hadn't realized she'd kept tightened for weeks. The air tasted lighter, the silence calmer, but whenever her phone vibrated, a ripple of tension passed through her. She tried to focus on catching up with her sister, enjoying long walks and late-night conversations, but she couldn't fully shake the sense that something back home was building without her. On the third morning, her suspicion was confirmed. Maya sent a picture. Karen's SUV sat in the same spot inside the garage, the vehicle angled slightly as if she'd parked in a hurry. Maya added a short text, "She knows you're gone. She's already acting weird." Avery felt her stomach tighten. She asked Maya to keep documenting anything unusual, and Maya assured her she would. But things escalated quickly. That afternoon, a string of screenshots arrived from the neighborhood group chat. Karen had begun posting passive-aggressive messages about neighbors who don't understand community sharing and people who think they're above everyone. She didn't mention Avery by name, but everyone knew who she meant. Several neighbors chimed in with their own opinions, some supportive, some skeptical, a few blatantly siding with Karen. The HOA board joined the conversation later, asking for clarification and reminding everyone to remain civil. Karen immediately claimed Avery had locked her out in retaliation for a harmless request and accused her of creating divisions in the neighborhood. Avery felt heat rising in her chest as she read, frustration mixing with disbelief. She wasn't even there to defend herself. Maya tried to counter some of Karen's claims, but Karen dismissed her as biased. The group chat swelled with tension, assumptions, and half-truths. That evening, Avery stepped onto her sister's balcony, staring out at the quiet street below. Her phone buzzed again, an email from the HOA board requesting an urgent meeting to address ongoing conflict. See. Avery drove back into the neighborhood with a knot lodged deep in her stomach. The vacation had cleared her mind, but the tension waiting for her felt heavier than when she'd left. Maya met her in the driveway before she even stepped out of the car, handing her a small folder of printed screenshots, photos, and notes, everything she had documented while Avery was away. Her gratitude was immediate. Maya's loyalty felt like an anchor in a storm that kept shifting directions. The HOA meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. Avery barely had time to unpack before heading to the community hall, where the board sat at a long table, and several curious neighbors lingered nearby, pretending not to eavesdrop. Karen was already there, sitting stiffly with her arms folded, her expression a blend of self-righteousness and anticipation. She didn't greet Avery. She didn't even look at her. The meeting began with the board asking each woman to explain her side. Karen launched into a dramatic retelling, claiming Avery had been aggressive, unreasonable, and determined to isolate herself from the community. She portrayed herself as the victim, insisting she'd only needed the garage briefly and had been humiliated by being locked out. Avery listened without interrupting, though each exaggeration twisted painfully in her chest. When it was her turn, she spoke calmly, laying out the facts. Karen parked without permission, ignored boundaries, issued veiled threats, and spread misinformation. She handed the board the folder Maya had prepared. Photographs of the SUV. Screenshots of Karen's comments. Copies of the voicemail. The room became quieter with each page turned. Karen's confidence faltered. Her arms uncrossed. Her eyes darted. In the end, the board sided firmly with Avery. They ruled that the garage was private property, that Karen had violated HOA conduct guidelines, and that she was prohibited from using Avery's space without explicit written permission. They issued her a